What's up? Ano ba yung ano? Ngayon ay kakauwi ko lang. Tapos tingnan natin kung may pwede tayong i-trade. Kanina may trade tayo. Medyo napaaga pero pagtingin ko ngayon ay tumaas na. So maghahanap tayo ng mga i-trade natin. Kung may maganda pang setup. So wala magandang setup ngayon, boys. Parang gusto ko tong catch wish. Ito catch wish. Pero di ako sure. Magiging natin yan, boy. Ano ba siya dito? Parang gusto pa niya umangat yan na confusion. Mag-sell dyan ka, so alanganin. Ito gandang trade. Ayan. Bantayan na lang natin, boy. Doon natin babantayan, no? Nakaabang. Ito din, no? May papasok kaya dyan? Let's see, my friend. Okay ba to ah? Magkalaw tong China, no? Oh. 45 pips naman. 4 hours pa. Aba, Euro Pound. Ano ba nangyari sa Euro Pound? Pwede ba to? Subukan natin mag-send dito pa eh. Tignan natin kung anong mangyayari. Let's see! Ay. 0.1 lang naman. Ayan mo na. Diba tinataas ah. Alright. Last 12 na. So, dyan na muna yan. Habang tayo'y magluluto. Wala bang signals? Walang signals? Wala. USD.
ร้าน
ร้านแล้วคุณทำเป็นไหน
น้องพูดข้ามอยู่ใส่ละน้องไปใส่
Parang Pilipinas lang ah. Parang Thailand to, Vietnam.
น้องอยู่ทางไหนเนาะ
Walang pinagbago.
หาน้องดูพูดบ่ไปวัดมันมั่งมาเออ
Patugtog na tayo. Bloomberg. Brexit, wala nang nangyari sa Brexit na yun.
Future. So procrastination, our word of the day. It was quite a stark cross-asset reaction. We also had a drop in S&P 500 index at that point in time, but we did also have some pretty disappointing earnings out of the U.S. around then as well, didn't we, Yusuf?
Yeah, the Brexit outcome overnight really infecting other asset classes, including U.S. equities. We were initially higher in the overnight session, then we moved lower. Facebook and Netflix selling off at the moment on the S&P 500, meaning we are continuing that trend. We're called lower by about 0.25%. The folks at the Markets Live team also make it clear that the trade war, the trade tensions are still very much in focus, and they've analyzed, together with the Bloomberg intelligence team, some of the data on a forward PE basis and exposure to China. And you know what? Looking at the tech companies on the S&P 500, the market doesn't actually think this is going to get resolved anytime soon. Speaking of analysis, let's get you some of the other market action with Juliet Sally in Singapore and Nanvi Saluja D'Souza in Mumbai. Juliet, what's on your radar?
Well, we are seeing Asian stocks lower after two sessions of gains, Yusuf, basically on the back of that warning bell we had from Texas Instruments in the US. And also you've had the IMF cutting its growth forecast for Asia for 2019 and also for 2020, their GDP forecast. Looking at the Hang Seng Index, because we thought that there could be some optimism there on the FT report that China is considering replacing Carrie Lam as chief executive, but it is down 1% on the lunch break. Of course, no surprise we are seeing the semiconductor stocks get hit in Taiwan and also in South Korea. But remember that the TAIEX yesterday also closed at its highest level since 1990. And I'm watching some upside in the Japanese yen, of course, getting a lift on that Brexit uncertainty. It's actually hit a one-week high against the greenback. We're also seeing demand from Tokyo-based funds who returned, of course, from that holiday yesterday, Tracy.
Yeah, that's that safe haven demand there. Navneet, let's talk about the India markets. Those have just opened. What's going on there?
Well, after the tick in the positive, we are back in the red, though the losses are right now contained. Across the board, we are seeing some bit of selling pressure coming by. Nifty is right now trading with cuts of about nearly 18 points in trade. Bank Nifty, which was up 0.5% just a while back, is witnessing some bit of selling pressure around the higher levels. So that's back to levels of about 29,300 as we speak. It's down nearly 121 points in trade. Sensex also seeing some marginal cuts. And looking at the broader markets, the Nifty 500, NSE 500 index is still witnessing some bit of cuts of about 0.2%. The volatility this morning has cooled off. Yesterday, we did see the India wicks rising by as much as 6%. So net, I think at higher levels, there is some fresh supply coming in, considering the gains that we've seen for Indian markets in the last 6 to 7 days. Also, we are in the thick of earnings season, so a lot of stocks which are reacting to the numbers. Axis Bank reported better than estimated numbers. Asset quality improved. The net interest margins at 3.5% were the best that we've seen in the last 9 quarters. Some positive tick there, but RBL Bank is the one which is down about 10% post its numbers. Back to you guys.
Nanvit, thank you for that. That's Nanvit Saluja, D'Souza there, and Juliet Sali, of course, as well. Let's check in on the first word headlines for you to round out the picture and cross out to Annabelle Drewlers. Good morning, Annabelle.
Good morning, Youssef. Well, Chilean President Sebastián Piñera has announced a series of financial aid packages in a bid to calm ongoing mass protests. The measures include a supplement for low-earning workers, a 20% increase in pensions for the poor, a scrapping of electricity price hikes, and higher taxes for the rich. The government says 15 people have been killed in 5 days of rioting and violent clashes. Russia and Turkey have struck a deal to create a buffer zone in northern Syria. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan talked with Vladimir Putin for more than 6 hours before announcing the agreement. It includes joint patrols and coordinated action with Syrian forces to remove Kurdish fighters from border areas. The Kurdish YPG fought for years beside US forces, but Turkey labels them separatists and terrorists. Bloomberg's being told Saudi Aramco will push to complete its initial public offering this year by relying more on local investors. Sources say the state-owned oil producer is considering a formal announcement of the listing plan as soon as the next few weeks. It was originally slated for October 20, but was postponed after overseas investors pushed back at Aramco's touted $2 trillion valuation. And the top US envoy to Ukraine has directly contradicted President Trump's assertion that there was no quid pro quo behind his July 25 phone conversation with the Ukrainian president. Acting Ambassador William Taylor made the claim in a statement to congressional impeachment committees. The president, meanwhile, has tweeted that the impeachment inquiry is, quote, a lynching, but added, we will win. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Annabelle Drewlers. This is Bloomberg. Tracy?
Thanks so much, Annabelle. Well, a UK official says Prime Minister Boris Johnson will call an election if Brexit is delayed until January 31st next year. Johnson's push to take the UK out of the European Union this month was derailed, with Parliament blocking his plan to rush the deal into law. The defeat on timing leaves Brexit in limbo, with the EU now to decide how long of a delay to offer.
Disappointment that the House has again voted for delay, rather than a timetable that would have guaranteed that the UK would be in a position to leave the EU on October the 31st with a deal. And we now face further uncertainty, and the EU must now make up their minds over how to answer Parliament's request for a delay.
Let's get more with our senior international editor, Jody Schneider. Jody, I want to start out with the EU side of things. It seems like they're going to agree to some sort of extension, but what do we know about exactly what they're saying here, and are they going to tie any conditions onto that extension?
Well, at this point, you almost certainly have to have a delay. They've just run out of time. Parliament has not given Boris Johnson what he wanted, this express deal. What we've heard from Donald Tusk, the European Council president, is that they are likely to give that request, to accede to that request that Boris Johnson himself made the other day, required by Parliament to do so, for a 3-month extension till January 31st. And further, while Donald Tusk didn't say about the date. He didn't state that they would do that. He said that the fact that they don't need to do it, they could do it by letter, didn't need another summit, seems to indicate that it would be that 3-month delay, which of course Boris Johnson, though he asked for it, he had to, he says he doesn't want to do that. But that looks like what's in the cards at this point.
Jody, I admit I stayed up late for this overnight, and there was a clearly palpable sense of frustration from the Prime Minister. What are his options, and what are the chances of a no-deal Brexit at this point?
Yeah, no deal looks like it's pretty much almost off the table. The chances are very diminished for it. Yet the question is, what would Boris Johnson do with this extra time if he gets these 3 months, which looks likely? He could use it to just try to get his deal through, and the EU may say, if you get a deal through sooner, you can leave sooner. But he also may call for an election. He's threatened that yesterday. He threatened it before that final vote. He didn't say it again, but he said he would call for an election if this January 31st deadline was what would be happening. Now, of course, he could call for that. He could also call for an election, which might give him a bigger majority. It also may have a risk that Labour could gain more seats, or the Brexit could be jeopardized entirely. So it would be a big risk if he called for an election.
All right, our senior international editor, Jody Schneider, there. I fear we're never going to be done with Brexit at this rate. Let's bring in Toby Lawson, Managing Director and Head of Global Markets at Societe Generale Securities Australia. He joins Yusuf and myself from our Sydney studio. It's good to see you this morning, Toby. Let's start out with that market reaction to the failed timetable vote in the UK. If you take a look at this chart, pull it up on the GTV function on your Bloomberg, you can see that reaction in the benchmark 10-year Treasury yield that I mentioned earlier. Yusuf mentioned that the S&P 500 also sold off at that very moment, 2:30 p.m. in New York. Was that cross-asset reaction the right one, or did investors maybe get this one wrong? Are they seeing too much of a risk in Brexit at the moment?
Well, I think they're just more frustrated, like you were mentioning in the previous comments. You said the palpable frustration with Brexit extends around the world, and the reaction to the further delay was reflected in those prices, both in the bond market and the equity market, and also, of course, in sterling. Sterling being really the benchmark to have a look at when we're looking at Brexit-related matters. We've had a very good run-up in sterling on optimism of a Brexit deal, up from 124 to close to 130, and now we're back at 128.50. So really we're watching that. So the pullback's been reasonable, but it still reflects some overall optimism that we'll get a Brexit deal. So investors have not given up, but they are extremely frustrated, as you mentioned.
Toby, you mentioned the pound, and we put together a chart for our clients for that additional context. GTV Go on the terminal. We're back at levels that we've seen early on in the process of this wider conversation. Basically, the gauge is now trading pretty much at its average since the initial vote. On the stocks front, you've got the folks at PIMCO saying UK banks look attractive. What are you telling clients in terms of exposure to UK assets at the moment?
Well, I think you've got to remain reasonably defensive, but overall, I think valuation would suggest that there is some reasonable upside potential. Now, clearly, it's not quite a binary outcome between a deal or no deal. As was mentioned by Jody earlier, the likelihood of a no deal is pretty much off the table. But the further delay and extension allows for further disruption, if you will, not only in the Parliament, but potentially of the wording of the deal to the extent, and then you've, of course, got a potential second referendum or another election. These are not positive things for investors when they're looking to buy value. So whilst there is tangibly some upside potential in UK stocks on a deal, they will remain cautious because we have no existing timetable to reflect that.
Toby, hold that thought. We still have a lot to talk about. That's Toby Lawson there. In the meantime, let's get you a preview of what it is that's coming up on the program. Qatar Airways chief Akbar Al-Baker tells us about his expansion plans and why he's not looking to push into the low-cost segment.
Yeah, but up next, are central banks at the limit of what can be done to spur economic growth? We're going to discuss that next. This is Bloomberg.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now, there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the BloombergBusinessRadio.com and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast.
Should Major League Baseball shorten up the season?
Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
If you're going to cut games, you're going to cut revenue.
From union heads to team owners, Michael Barr, Scott Soshnick, and Evan Novi-Williams speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry.
And the Braves president Derek Schiller, National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. You can carry information about the business world in your head, or you can let us do the carrying for you.
The question is, how long can it last?
Leaving you free to think about other things, like what to do with all that information.
What type of time frame will it take for you to change your outlook?
What do the inflationistas most get wrong?
You're working on a lot of things that we have to be worried about.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Revisions, return policies. There are so many ways to redo a decision.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Do they have any path other than the courts?
Except here, we have to get it right the first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war. Are there winners?
So that you can too.
How does your modeling have to pivot to reflect a different scenario?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Let's check in on how Middle East markets fared in the previous session. It was an eventful few hours. Here with all of it is Simone Foxman. She joins us from the Qatar Financial Center in Doha. A lot of earnings then, Simone.
Yes, lots of earnings. Saudi Tadawul really in focus yesterday. That index rising 1.4%. But we saw gains really as well in Dubai and in Abu Dhabi. The Dubai index up almost 0.9%. Abu Dhabi up almost 0.7. The only place we didn't see gains in the Gulf here is Qatar down about 0.2%. Now let's stick with that Saudi earnings story, because there are some companies that we are watching today as we move into trading with earnings coming out late in the day yesterday. Lead among them, Saudi Telecom. They're reporting a profit, but that profit missing analyst estimates. Sort of the reverse story at Ma'aden, the Saudi Arabian mining, where now we saw narrower loss than expected, and Sahara International reporting a 40% decline in third quarter profits. So all those are stocks to watch. Let's stick with Saudi, but let's turn now to the bond story. Interesting bit of news yesterday was that the kingdom raised $2.5 billion in 10-year sukuk, and it's doing so at its lowest dollar yields in around 4 years. So really attractive pricing that actually priced better than initial guidance, around 130 over the mid-swap rate. And you can check out this chart here on the terminal at GTV Go if you're a Bloomberg subscriber. Yusuf, Tracy.
I am. Thank you for that, Simone. Simone Foxman there at the Qatar Financial Center in Doha. Let's talk about our other top story. Mario Draghi will preside over his last ECB rate decision tomorrow before handing over the reins to Christine Lagarde. He's joined the ranks of policymakers appealing for fiscal health after delivering extraordinary monetary stimulus during his tenure. That request may be falling on deaf ears. HSBC calculations show that boosts from extra spending in the Eurozone could be just 0.4% of GDP this year. That's bad news for markets and policymakers banking on more fiscal help to shore up growth. Toby Lawson, Managing Director and Head of Global Markets at Societe Generale Securities Australia, is still with us from Sydney, from our Sydney studio. Toby, I'm looking here at some of the yields in Germany, Japan, and the US. They're clearly rising, and that is despite these easing measures from central banks. And that leads us to the question of the day that the Markets Live team has put out. Do markets sense that central banks are nearing the limit of what they can do to spur growth?
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable question to ask, and I think the answer is probably close to yes. We've noticed that as interest rates head towards zero and even in negative, the impact in the multiplier effect in terms of economic activity is somewhat declined. Despite the fact that negative interest rates would suggest people want to spend, they continue to save. So, yes, I think the central banks are probably going to start urging governments to step in. There is still obviously weaponry for the central banks to use apart from pure interest rate policy. Quantitative easing is again something of purchasing of bonds that they will continue to do, increasing their balance sheets. But ultimately, I think the pressure will come onto governments. And you mentioned there that some of the European governments have not really pushed hard on fiscal side. I think there will be pressure applied by ECB and potentially the new president of the ECB making that push as part of their launching of their new position.
Toby, Youssef mentioned that HSBC note saying that the economic impact of fiscal stimulus might not be as much as some policymakers would want. What do we think about what fiscal stimulus can actually do for the world? Are we placing too much faith in it? Are policymakers taking a one-size-fits-all approach to fiscal stimulus? They're not really talking about what kind of fiscal action they want. We don't hear them differentiate between tax cuts or infrastructure spending, for instance. Are we placing too much faith on the power of fiscal?
Well, I think you're definitely putting too much weight on a coordinated approach from a government perspective. We have seen probably much more coordination of central banks and in relation to interest rate policy and probably currency for that matter, but definitely nothing on the fiscal side. So yes, to the point is relevant in so much as we're likely not to see an aggregate approach on fiscal policy from governments. They're very much driven by their own domestic issues when it comes to spending, direct spending into the economy. Having said that, you mentioned tax cuts, you mentioned infrastructure spending. These are two of the obvious things that governments would do to put direct money into the economy to try to inspire growth and to create jobs, if you will, create economic activity.
Toby, the Fed is forecast to cut rates next week, but on the sidelines of that, you have quite a bit of political turmoil in the United States. Bloomberg understands now that the U.S. President's top envoy to the Ukraine is now one of the biggest threats to his presidency, which would take the wind out of the sails of any other policy effort that he would like to allocate resources to. I mean, how high up on your priority list is it at the moment, these developments?
Well, I think geopolitics, clearly trade, Brexit are high. I think the internal domestic politics around impeachment, I think markets are probably suspecting that nothing quick will happen. It is obviously very, a critical issue, but for markets, it's a little bit beyond their scope to make an investment decision around. Clearly, there's a long way to go in that particular play. So the focus there is, does it distract the administration in terms of its economic policies? Probably not. Does it distract the Fed? No. The Fed are likely to take another insurance cut before the end of the year. That's our view, because growth is running about 2.2%, benign enough with inflation going nowhere, gives them some room to move, particularly as the rest of the world have been lowering rates.
Toby, let's try to end it on a positive note. We did get one sign of optimism when it came to the U.S. economy yesterday. We had the Richmond Fed manufacturing indicator out. That showed the highest positive number since April, and economists had actually been expecting a negative number. Are we overestimating the impact of the trade tensions on the manufacturing sector? In other words, have we been too pessimistic on trade?
Well, the old expression, one swallow doesn't make a summer, and so that's one piece of data. Most of the manufacturing data we've seen around the world has definitely been softer and driven, I think, ostensibly by the trade dispute. So I think at this stage you would suggest that the economic activity around manufacturing has declined, but that Richmond Fed number was pretty good. The other data you want to have a look at this week is obviously factory orders, durable goods, as well as consumer sentiment in the US. I think they're the numbers to have a look at, but overall, yes, manufacturing has softened. Has it softened to recessionary levels? That remains to be seen. That's what we'll be looking out for in the Q4.
All right, I think that's as optimistic as we're going to get. That's Toby Lawson, Managing Director and Head of Global Markets at Societe Generale Securities Australia. Thank you so much. Now, don't forget our interactive TV function, TV Go. There you can watch us live, you can catch up on past interviews, as well as dive into any of the securities or Bloomberg functions that we talk about on the show. You can also become part of the conversation by sending us instant messages. So if you have a particular manufacturing number that you are watching very carefully, well, you can let us know. know. This is for Bloomberg subscribers only. Check it out at TV Go.
Nood tayo ng kantol.
Magandang gabi, ito ang Rap Rap in Action dito sa Rap Rap in Action. Si Rap Rap ang solusyon. Ako po si Rap Rap.
At ako naman po si Sherry Ramon. Magandang gabi.
Magandang gabi, Cherry. Simulan na natin ang ating public service. Ano?
Ako, una pong magrereklamo si Rap Rap ay si Dennis Garote.
Dennis Garote. Dennis Garote.
Magandang gabi po sa inyo, Rap Rap, Cherry po, no? Irereklamo ko lang po sana yung tubig sa amin, ilang araw na po wala.
Okay.
Doon po sa San Jose.
Aha. San Jose.
Alam niyo po, medyo nahihirapan na po kami. Siyempre, pag dumumi ka, maliligo, maghuhugas ng plato,
Tama yan,
maliligo.
Sige po, susolusyonan natin yan. Cherry, tawagan mo nga yung OIC natin ng MWFF.
Hello?
Hello, magandang gabi po. Ito po ang Rap Rap in Action. Ano? Meron pong lumapit dito sa akin at ang sabi, wala silang tubig ano? Sa barangay San Jose.
San Jose po.
Oo, meron po ba kayong solusyon dyan? Ano?
Meron po, pero kailangan mo na nilang maghintay.
Maghintay saan po?
Kay Mayor po, kasi naliligo pa siya.
Teka, naliligo si Mayor. Buti may tubig si Mayor.
Kaya nga po nawawala ng tubig ang buong bayan dahil matagal maligo si Mayor. Pagkatapos po niya, magkakaroon na po.
Ganun po ba? O sige, pakisabi na lang kay Mayor na pakibilis-bilisan ang paliligo, ano? Para hindi ma-delay yung supply ng tubig. Maraming salamat po.
Okay po, sige.
Okay, ayan, narinig mo Dennis, pagkaligo ni Mayor, magkakatubig na sa inyo.
Sige po, maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat din, Dennis.
Maraming salamat, Sir Dennis. Naku, ang susunod naman po magrereklamo sa Rap Rap ay si Joel ng Valenzuela.
Joel ng Valenzuela. Joel, pasok Joel. Sige, maupo ka Joel.
Magandang gabi, Joel.
Oo, yan ang mic mo.
Hello. Hello. Ayun po, magandang gabi po, Rap Rap.
Magandang gabi.
Gusto ko lang po sana isumbong yung nangyayari doon sa lugar namin sa Digula.
Saan yan, Digula?
Sa may Valenzuela po.
Valenzuela, sa Digula. Ano ba nangyari dyan?
Bale po, kasi nagkakaroon ng nakawan. Kasi laging walang ilaw yung mga poste namin. Sana
madilim.
Po, madilim po. Po.
I'm sorry, baby, we didn't work yet. Let's just be friends instead. O tayo ay wala na, ito'y nakakatuwa. Di na kailangan magpaalam kung saan man magpunta. Nakakasawa na rin, puro na lang away bate. Di ko kailangan ng lalaki na ako'y sasantabi. Oh baby, thank you, yes I really loved you. But things are changing, so yeah baby, I must leave you. Maraming salamat sa alaala. Di ko malilimutan ating pagsasama, baby. I'm sorry, baby, we didn't work yet. Let's just be friends instead, cause I still got you. I'm sorry, baby, we didn't work yet. Let's just be friends instead, cause I still got you. I got you, baby. Nobody wanna see us together, but it don't matter now. Matagal na nga kitang bet, pasensya kung makulit. Tatanggapin ko ang lahat kahit medyo masakit. Ikaw na ang pinaka gwapo sa aking mata. Lahat ay aking gagawin para na binata. Ikaw yung lalaki, pati aking prinsipe. Pag nawala ka pa, nakakawalang gana, baby. Nobody wanna see us together, but it don't matter now, 'cause I got you. Nobody wanna see us together, but it don't matter now, 'cause I got you. Oh, nobody wanna see us together, but it don't matter now. Simula nung dumating ka, buhay ko ay nag-iba. Mundo kong dati malungkot, binigyan mo ng sigla. Ako'y napapangiti, di ko na nga mawari. Pagkausap ka, sinta, ako'y hindi napapakali. Dahil ikaw na, mahal walang iba. Sa piling mo ay sasaya, sana ikaw na aking makasama. Hanggang sa pagtanda, sa'yo'y kontento na wala nang hahanapin pa, baby. Nobody wanna see us together, but it don't matter, no. Nobody wanna see us together, but it don't matter, no. 'Cause I got you. Nobody wanna see us together.
Matagal na talaga kitang bet. Oy, green, 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 green.
Together, but it don't matter, no. 'Cause I got you, babe. Nobody wanna see us together, but it don't matter, no. Huwag kang mag-aalala, hayaan mo na sila. Kahit ano pa ang sabihin nila, mahal kita. Huwag kang magpa-apekto sa di naman totoo. Andito lang ako para sa'yo, kahit ano pang mangyari. Mahal mo ba ako? Lahat ba ay totoo? Sabihin mo na hanggang maaga pa para malaman ko. Mahal ko, para sa'yo ito. Lahat ay gagawin para di ka lang mawala sa buhay ko, yeah. Nobody wanna see us together, but it don't matter, no. 'Cause I got you, babe. Nobody wanna see us together, but it don't matter, no. Oh, oh, oh. Pasensya kung makulit, tatanggapin ko ang lahat kahit medyo masakit. Ikaw na ang pinaka maganda sa aking mata. Lahat ay aking gagawin para iyong madama na mahal kita. Wala nang iba, ikaw lang yung aking dalagang Pilipina. Ikaw yung dalaga, ikaw yung prinsesa. Pag nawala ka pa, nakakawalang gana, baby. Nobody wanna see us together, but it don't matter, no. Nobody wanna. Simula nang makita ka, puso ko'y nagwala. Nangakong mamahalin at aalagaan kita. Binigyan mo ng dahilan, puso ay pagbigyan. Mga ngiti mong hinding-hindi ko pagsasawaan. Minahal nga kita, hindi mo nadama. Nawala ng gana, mahalin ka ng sobra. Sana naman ay malaman mo na andito lang ako sa hirap at ginhawa, baby. Nobody wanna see us together, but it don't matter, no, 'cause I got you, babe. Nobody wanna see us together, but it don't matter, no, 'cause I got you. Nobody wanna see us together.
What is the most expensive stock in the world? Naturally, you would think about world's most expensive companies like Amazon or Apple. Believe it or not, this company is twice smaller than Apple, and yet its stock price is multiple times higher. It's probably more expensive than your mortgage. In fact, you would have to save every single penny for 6 straight years to be able to buy a single stock. In other words, if you want to invest with Warren Buffett, you should have at least $322,200 to buy a single stock. That's not surprising considering that the stock price has increased by almost 8,000% since the company was founded. If you would have invested just $1,000 back then in Berkshire Hathaway, you would have made around $10 million by 2014. Of course, we can't go back in time and invest in this company, but what we can do is learn how to invest like him. And in this video, we are going to break down his 2 most important rules of investing. The first one is never lose money. I know that it sounds quite absurd, as if Buffett is just making fun of us, but if you give it a closer look, there are logical reasons why most people lose money in the stock market, and your job is to simply avoid these traps by understanding the rules of the game that many investors neglect. If you take a look at the companies that are traded in the market, they have a price tag, but because no one can afford that, even you, Jeff, they are broken down into many stocks. But the key question here is, does this company really worth $925 billion? The answer is no. You see, there is a big difference between the price and value. The stock price jumps up and down every single day. Even slightly negative news that could be even fake can drive the price down. However, not the value, because the value is what the company really worth. For instance, Apple released iPhone XR at the end of 2018, and sales weren't as high as people expected. As a result of that, Apple got a lot of negative press, which drove the stock price down from $230 to $160 within 3 months. That's a really big jump. But did the company become 30 or 40% less valuable in such a short period of time? Of course no. Even though iPhone sales were down, the company recorded higher profit compared to the previous years. That's exactly why the stock price jumped back to over $200. When the entire world was talking about how Warren Buffett lost billions of dollars because he invested in Apple, he didn't give a damn. He even wanted the stock price to decrease further so that he can buy more of it, because he understands the difference between value and price. In fact, he once said, risk comes from not knowing what you are doing. In other words, Warren doesn't like taking the risk because he knows that you might lose money when you take the risk, which violates his first rule of investing: never lose money. So he only invests in businesses that are clearly undervalued. Of course, you can't completely eliminate the risk, but you can decrease it to its bare minimum. In 2002, Buffett came across a company called PetroChina. After looking at its financial statements, it was clear that this company worth around $100 billion. But when he looked at its stock price, the company was valued only at $30 billion. He knew that it's a golden opportunity. And based on the political climate, Buffett anticipated that oil prices will either rise or at least stay stable. So he invested almost $500 million in this company. And guess what happened? With the rise of oil prices, the company didn't only reach $100 billion valuation as Buffett expected, it skyrocketed to $275 billion. Buffett sold his share and made $3.6 billion in profit. Not bad, right? Alright, we are clear about the first rule. What about the second one? Never forget rule number 1. I know that it sounds absurd again, but if you take a look at the companies that Warren Buffett has invested, you will notice that he followed the exact same philosophy. And since it made him the world's richest investor, I think it works. So, good luck.
Mamaya ito maglalag.
This past weekend, North American teams kind of shit the bed. And it's funny, I could be talking about pretty much any esport and I'd still be right, but there is something different. Over the weekend, North American teams at the League of Legends World Championships went a combined 5-13 in the group stage. That is the worst they've ever performed under the modern world system. It's a catastrophe, and it's got a lot of people asking, how do you fix the dumpster fire that is NA League of Legends? Alright, so why are NA fans so upset? Well, combined, NA teams went 5-13 in the group stage. That is a 27% win rate, which is the worst they've done in 5 years. But that's not new, right? NA has always been bad on the international stage, or at least that's how it feels, right? Well, that's not quite the case. See, actually, NA's performance has always been more middling than abject garbage. It's just felt worse for NA fans. Now though, NA isn't that far off from the LMS in terms of wins in the group stage, and they're not even gonna be a region next year. We're also within spitting distance of Vietnam, and they're a minor region. Obviously, this result has people memeing that NA doesn't even deserve major region status, and all the major regions are represented in top 8 after all 3 of them.
You have no idea what you've done to me, Joe! You don't!
But it's also sparked an interesting discussion about how the hell do you even go about fixing this problem? The problem is kind of deeply rooted in NA League of Legends, between the server and and the culture and management and coaching. The point is, there isn't really one clean answer. It's a super complicated issue. So let's bring up the issues one by one, and maybe we can try to figure out something when this is all over. So one of the big things that get thrown around about why NA isn't that good is their reliance on imports. And that's undeniable. Every single NA team at Worlds, and every team in the North American Summer Playoffs for that matter, maxed out their import slots. Which is to say that they're not developing as much homegrown talent. Not only that, but some teams like TSM and Team Liquid are technically running more than 2 imports since they have players who have been around so long that they don't count. imports anymore. And that's not to say that NA doesn't develop any homegrown talent at all. C9 has made a lot of headlines over the years for building up fresh NA players, but it's not quite enough. Obviously, the academy system helped, but I don't remember the next line. Obviously, NA has also added the academy system, which has definitely helped get some players into worlds that we might not have seen otherwise.
The academy put my career on the map because I started out in Equipox Academy and I got the chance to play against Froggen very, very often. It was a huge learning opportunity, and I think since you have like the 10 LCS players always now, and then you have 10 academy players, if those players are taking their job seriously, they're always going to be able to improve a lot.
But clearly, the academy system hasn't done enough. It's gotten us players like Damonte, sure, but Damonte is on a team with 2 Korean players who, let's be honest, aren't landing spots in the LCK anytime soon. Developing local talent leads to players who can communicate better with each other, and it leads to hungrier players who have earned their spots on the roster, not sometimes washed up players who got bounced out of a league they didn't deserve to be in anymore. Then there's the other problem. Solo queue kinda sucks in North America. Between the fact that NA has the smallest player base, allegations that NA pros have attitude problems when they're playing solo queue, and the horrible ping, playing League online in NA is awful. The ping seems fixable, and listen, NA has the worst ping of any major region in League of Legends. It's an enormous problem for anybody who's trying to practice. Then again, it seems kind of lame to just ask Riot to build a new server so that NA pros can get better. And a new server isn't going to fix the player base issue and the alleged attitude issue. You can't just throw a bunch of money at the problem and hope it gets fixed. Now, there are some suggestions out there for more radical fixes to the issue. Former League of Legends caster and team owner Monte Cristo suggested a million things on Twitter, including opening up certain regions to not count as import slots in the NALCS. While I don't necessarily agree with Monty, I understand where he and others are coming from on this issue. See, if you open up the NALCS to also include Latin American, Brazilian, Oceanian players, well, NA players are going to have to work harder to earn their spots, or they'll be usurped by a really hungry player from Australia or something. An amalgamation of a half dozen regions says that NA doesn't deserve to be a major region anymore. And maybe that's harsh, but maybe it's true. The issue is that Riot is probably never going to let something like that happen. See, the LCS is franchised. And that means that Riot and the investors, which is say the team owners who have bought shares in the league, have a lot riding on the continued longevity and success of the NALCS, not the combination LA, SA, NA, and Oceania. Oceanian League. There is another solution that's being brought up as a potential solution to NA's problems. Make NA play best of threes. See, in the LCS right now, everyone plays best of ones all with a regular season and then best of threes in playoffs and international tournaments. The theory goes that if you make them play BO3s all year, they'll be better at best of threes by the time Worlds rolls around. And yes, European players are playing best of ones all year too, but clearly it hasn't hampered them in the way that maybe it's hampered NA, I guess. Europe also has a thorough system of feeder leagues, which get players from rookies in their local scenes to starting spots in the LEC. That's worked really well for them and has led to hungrier, better players overall. The issue is that NA actually did used to have BO3s, and one of the reasons Riot moved away from them was to increase viewership when things went franchise. And look, viewership matters a lot, especially when you have outside investors who are looking to make a return on their investment. But you know what also contributes to viewership? Players that win things internationally. Maybe I'm just spitballing here, but I have a feeling that if you have a league in which players go to Worlds and, I don't know, win something, it'll translate to viewership back in the regular season because all of a sudden the regular season matters. And look, the easiest solution to this whole problem is just to have more international tournaments, but I don't think Riot's cool with that one either. In the situation with more international tournaments, NA will be forced to compete or they'll become irrelevant. Eventually, they'll just get good enough to hang with the rest of the world. The problem is that if you have more international tournaments, less people will probably watch the regular season games because, well, they'd rather watch the best teams in the world instead of just 10 NA teams. On top of that, Worlds and MSI become far less special and might have decreased viewership, which again is something that Riot absolutely doesn't want. All right, so there have been a bunch of solutions, and honestly, a lot of them don't seem super likely. So where does that leave us? Well, really, there's no clear solution. People can talk about player attitudes and about how coaches need to be tougher all day, but honestly, we don't know what goes on behind the scenes. I'm sure that the players who left Berlin on Liquid, C9, and Clutch this weekend are extremely upset, and they're probably just gonna grind it out. I don't know if that's the solution either. But here's what I do know. The fans are finally fed up. The conversation has reached a fever pitch, and if the players, the coaches, the staff, the management of the LCS doesn't do something soon, things are looking pretty dark for the future of NA League of Legends. You know, we've done this so clean that we don't have an end board. Devin, say something stupid.
Hey, man.
Is this port active? Does it get an IP address on the LAN? What VLAN is it on? Is it online? Can it egress the firewall? What else is on this network? Would it stand up to a little stress testing? What if I could find out right now? Shark Jack is portable, powerful with USB-C charging. Just flip the switch and jack into a network to execute payloads in seconds, with instant feedback from the RGB LED and Cloud C2 for remote access and exfiltration. Or get a root shell on this Keychain Linux box. Shark Jack. Take a bite out of the network.
Have you ever missed a day?
No, I have not missed a day.
Astringent mo, baka hindi effective, tol. Kung ako sa'yo, i-demanda mo yung factory ng Eskinol. You can't beat me! Pacquiao tried twice. Yung texture ng face mo parang Yang Chow fried rice.
Alam mo kung bakit mas payatot ka pa sa akin? May utol kang mataba na madamot sa pagkain.
Yo! Ako na yata ang pinaka-pogi sa Pasig. Itong kalaban ko hawig ni Ogie Alcacid. Di porket ikay mayaman, ikay mistiso. Sampaling kaya kita ng 1,000 tig-pipiso. Sino ba sa atin ang mas matangos ang ilong? Aminin mo na para matapos na itong. Ako yata ang agamulak ng Cebu. Itong kalaban ko mukhang tagatulak ng Shabu.
Nababakla ka na. Ang dami mong alam na chismis. Mabuti pa kaya gawan mo na lang ako ng thesis. Kasi yung mga tira mo supot parang nabasa na kwitis. Lakas manlayat, ang pangit naman ng misis. Pinakapangit na bruha sa buong daigdig. Dinala ko pa sa buhok na liblib, binubarang ko tangina, merong buhok sa dibdib.
Ako'y lasing na sa sobrang San Miguel, SMP. Hindi naman ako naka-FMCC. Yang damit mo para binili mo lang sa SM City. Dapat di ko na sinanay to. Ang ganda ng suot mo, ano yan? Pinili ng nanay mo.
Yeah. Paalala ng pare sa battle, bawal ang pikol. Maya-maya barado ka, parang ilong na may sipol. Yo, paalala lang ulit, pare, bawal ang supot. At no pets allowed, guard may nakalusot.
Pag nag-iba yung karakter ko, magiging massacre to. Sobrang tindi, maiihi ka sa diaper mo. Hindi na ako aabot sa 2x2 kahit kumabol ako. Kaya para lang sa lahat na nag-aabang, napilitan akong pumatol sa'yo. Nilakad ni Mike tong laban na to para tuparin ang panaginip mo. Para masabi mo rin sa sarili mo na kahit minsan, tumakbo ka rin sa isip ko. Ang lalim, wow! Pag ako pumanat ng ganyan, kahit foul, basket counts. Ikaw, mas matanda ka pa kay Andy Howe. Nagpapaka-kick of the dot pero yung estilo ng rap, wilding out. At sabi nila ako ay addict daw. Kaya para sa 2.5 ounce, itong home court mo, gagawin kong hunting grounds. Kaya dapat lang nabayaran nila ako ng 500 tao kasi may papasikatin na naman akong amateur. Casting counts!
Pag mayroong salamin, buti hindi ka natatakot. Malapit na mag-time, baka hindi ka na umabot. Isang piti ka lang, parang binilog na kulangot. Puro ka tigyawan kasi mahilig ka sa spicy foods. Butas-butas sa mukha mo, parang tinapakan ka ni Tiger Woods.
Yung pabango mo, amoy danggit. Amoy arinola yung anghit. Mas maitim ka pa siguro sa areola ni Garnet. Pare, usapang lalaki. Alam kong walang mukha ang tae, pero mukha kang tae. Tapos ang baho mo pa, kaya diring-diri sila. Lahat na nagpapapicture sa'yo, sa pipig humihinga. At hindi ka na puputi kahit matuklap yung balat mo sa kakahilod. Sa sobrang pangit mo, lahat ng ID picture mo nakatalikod. Ha? Nilabanan mo pa ang pinakamabangis na makata. 30 anyos na rakistang pinanis lang ng bata. Magpalit ka na ng damit, pawis ka na ata. At nagkakalat ka na, buti na lang may walis ka sa baba. Kaya ngayon, kaya kitang labanan kahit freestyle. Paano ka naging batas? Wala ka namang kahit police file. Sa presinto, ako talaga eksperto. Kahit anong topic o paksa, ako ay laging handa. Nagbalik loob ka lang, ikaw ay dating bakla. Ako ang pangulo ng rap dito sa ating bansa. Hindi ka magiging batas kung wala ang aking lagda. Imposibleng maging Sagittarius yan si Righteous One. Putang ina, may virus yan. Tinan mo nga itsura ng paa, parang instrumental -1. Tapos talapan ka sa akin para ka nakipag one-on-one sa atom bomb. Mamaya-maya bubula na naman yung gilagid mo na parang bubble gum. Kasi yung talsik mo lumalaway. Tinan mo, ngumunguso ka pa. Hindi ka pa nga nakakasibak, pero bakit may tulo ka na? I do this for the culture. Yan ang lagi sinasabi mo sa media. Pero yung laway mo na panes, may sarili ng culture yung bakterya. Ikaw ang dahilan kung bakit gumuho ang...
Sa mga hindi nakakaalam kung ano yung shopback, it is basically a cashback, guys. So, especially sa mga mahilig mag-shopping dyan online, mahilig...
Ang bahay nyo. Lumambot yung lupang tinitirikan dahil sa kakatulo ng laway mo. Speaking of messenger, pasikat sa akin ito sa messenger. Mayat pa yan nagpaparamdam. Little drummer boy. Kasi puro papansin para papampam. Sabi niya, Idol, kung in-announce ko na main event tayo, ang daming taong nabuang. Sabi ko, ano main event tayo? Tangina mo, ako lang! Halimuyak uyak mo'y amoy century tuna. Bago ka magyabang, maligo ka muna. Ignoranting nila lang, iho di puta. IQ test mo, negatibo resulta. Pati alpabeto, hindi kabisado, talagang kulang-kulang. Ano daw sunod sa X? Sabi ko, why? Sabi niya, tinatanong ko lang.
Sablay na sablay pero ako ay mas gwapo pa rin. Sapagkat ikaw ay pawis, ako ay gwapo at sa'kin ikay panis. Na para bang ulam na hindi nilagay sa ref. Ang Q sa harap, ilagay ang F ha. Ikaw na ang
Isang rapper na biktima ng ketong at isang barker ng jeepney sa Kalentong. Sa dami ng tigyawat mo, ano yan? 2 pimples per hour. Anong tawag doon? Pimple power. Sa dami ng... Sunog na tao. Para kang tinira ng flaming na hadukin. Sa sobrang itim mo, kaya mong mag-iwan ng fingerprint sa uling. Mas marami ka pang fans sa paggawaan ng pamaypay. Yung mga videos mo, mas marami pang views sa mga bahay sa Tagaytay. Mas marami ka pang chick sa asukal na daddy. Dahil mas marami ka pang hit sa bangko ng Miami. Tatadlarin ko pa rin to kahit walang kwenta tong kaaway. Pasensya na pero naiwan ko yata yung konsensya ko sa bahay. At malamang marami magagalit sa battle na to, hindi na sa akin bago yun. Hindi ako natatakot papunta sa impyerno. Galing na ako doon! Halit ba? Kalag-kaling kaya kita palabas. Parang si Karen Davila. Tapos wala nang sabi-sabi pa. Kamehameha! Lalo ng ganitong ganado ako, sigurado mapupuruhan to. At dahil wala pa akong hotel, ikaw muna tutuluyan ko! Sino mga tinira? Gusto nyo ng intriga? Hindi na kami dahil sa taxi, wala ng tissue. Kaya magpati ka mag-isa, ito ang tissue. Diba, scandal to, pwede mo noon. Makakalapit ka lang sa akin pag ang lakad palahod. Hindi mo kasi, 18 ka pa, magpaparenta ka na, chismoso ka pa rin. Sinama mo ba si Badang? Teka, sino si Badang? Rapper din siya, kaso siya lang ang may alam. Tara lang sa buhay, kumispeto ka pa. Gusto mo ko lang yan, nagsalunin, pero wala. Ako hindi kumakahol. Pag hindi po nakakagat, ako ang kanang kamay ni Kiko na nakangarat. Basta na ikong galit, dati-dati ka. Crazy ka, ay mga balat mo, pabalik-balik ka. Kaya huwag kang hari-hari, pare matematika. Lalamunin ko, tuki ko ng kame-hame-ha. Matematika, sa balat ng diabetic na ang buhay ay nasira. Nagangit na sumintok, lapit upang maging sariwa. Wala kang pangalan, kulang ka sa pantiwa. Nagkamali ka ng piniling na kampi. You want peace, gagawin ka ng piniling na karne. Sabi ka mo lang lang sa babay lang namin. Pagpabaris pa kay Aristotle na pag nagalit. Ano lang, gusto ko ng sakitan, mga botong kilalang. Ang aking mga kaalitan, si Batang. Akala niya palisahan yung papaitan. Tapsihan na ang pinakamahal niyang nakainan. Ilan taong ka na ba talaga, ha? Ilan taong ka na? Aminin mo. Ilan taong ka na nagsisinungaling sa sarili mo? Nakakatamad maghanda kasi pag ganito katanda yung kalaban. Kaso wala akong magagawa. Bumagsak ako sa kanya, kaya kailangan pag-aralan. At akin na pag-alaman na ikaw ay isang OG talaga. Noong 1991 pala, nag-pogi rap ka pa. Tumigil ka edad 23 kasi nakornihan ka na. Kaya pala MJ, kasi pagbalik niya, 45 na siya. Sa madaling salita, isa kang ulyaning matanda. Yung respeto nila sa'yo, unti-unti nang mawawala. Tapos promo pa yung battle, kaya wala kang papuring mapapala. Pero at least may pagmamalaki mo sa mga apo mo na nakalaban mo si Looney. Pag uwi mo mamaya! Alam mo ba, yung huling battle natin na nagsisilbing patunay na di mo pa kayang tapatan ng kakaibang lupit at husay. Kahit ilang beses yung gayahin, wala nang hihigit sa tunay. Sa sobrang asintado ko, pumipikit yung bullseye. Ang kopa mga bara ko, lahat may kaugnayan. Sa katunayan, wala na akong kailangang patunayan. Nagrarap ako ngayon para sa aking kabuhayan. Nagrarap ka lang para sa burat mo, baka sakaling matsupayan. Kaya manalangin ka na sa Diyos mo. Wala akong pake kung nag-practice ka ng husto. Sumigaw ka sa langit, ilabas mo lahat ng galit mo sa mundo. Pero kahit anong gawin mo, pare, akin na larong to. Halos lahat ng rapper dito galing sa tamod ko. Kaya wag kang humarang-harang dyan na parang sigang maton. Ako dahilan kung bakit nagsulputan yung mga putang inang liga ngayon. Dekada na ako sa eksena, tol. Hindi lang taon. Nagsilbing inspirasyon ng mga rapper at alam mong kabilang ka doon. Walang Eminem kung wala siyang napanood na Dr. Dre. At walang Jordan kung wala siyang napanood na Dr. J. Kung matalino ka, alam mo na ang multi nakasunod. Walang flip-top at sulugan kung wala kayong luning na panood. At ang inambag ko sa eksena, di ka...
What is the most valuable scene from the series Billions for traders? Stay tuned. Hey guys, warm welcome to your So have you watched the TV series Billions? If not, it's well worth watching. I am not finished it yet. I am on series 3. I kind of dip in and out of it. I'm going through a phase. Right this filming, I'm just coming to the end of series 3, I think it is. And you know, it's an entertainment program, it's something to watch for entertainment purposes. It's about a hedge fund manager, a bent hedge fund manager who does crooked things.
Ay, pinakamaganda yan, sir. Apo.
When there's a world of options at my fingertips, there are no limits to create a story for...
Yakong sumbong nakaabot ho sa amin. Ngayon, kamay pambansang sumbungan kung minsan yung mga reklamo na parang ang dating, tinatanggap po namin, pangmayaman ba yan? Pangkatamtaman, pangmasa, pangwalang-wala talaga. Tinatanggap po namin kung sinong tama. Ayaw lang po namin, magkaroon pa kasi ng additional program pagdating ho sa Real Estate 101. Construction and makeover. Siguro sa mga darating na panahon. Hello everyone. The human brain is full of mysteries and hidden potential.
Pangayaw mo naman kasi ikaw wala ka namang ganun eh. Grabe, hindi namin ay gusto mo na basta ako, hinapin ako.
Pag-vlog pa kami, dahil pa nitong dalawa.
Ano to? Wala naman ako sakit. Maraming tao. Wala sa prank kung hindi na
Wala yan. Yung mga yun, sa stage, kumpara sa kanyang edad, hindi mo talaga mahirap pintasan. Pag mapanood mo yan, mapanood mo sila sa stage, kitang-kita mo yung presence ni Floji, ma-entertain ka talaga. No? Meron din silang mga kengkoy, joke sa stage. Tapos iti-take nila ako, pagka-take nila sa akin, i-edit nila after, saka nila itataas yung sa track na meron ng effects and editing. Kaya pag narinig mo yung finished product, kala mo yun na yung totoo. Hindi pa siyempre papagandahin pa rin. Doon bumilog talaga ako. Bihira lang ang tao. And sa trabaho namin, bihira lang ang ganun ka meticuloso, tedious pagdating sa mga bagay na yan.
Hi guys! Welcome back to another video.
Whether you know Dave Bautista as a fearsome WWE superstar or as a galactic guardian named Drax, you're probably a fan. Dave Bautista is a really likable, personable, agreeable person. But it's kind of surprising if you know very much about what Dave Bautista has been through. Bautista was born in 1969, and according to his book, Bautista Unleashed, the Washington, D.C. area he grew up in was one of the nation's poorest at the time. As he was growing up, crack cocaine was about to hit the streets, killings in the neighborhood were common, and according to him, life expectancy for children was, quote, worse than in many third-world countries. Bautista casually mentions that 3 people died on his doorstep before he turned 9. In an interview with the Tampa Bay Times, he elaborates on one particular death where his mother found a man dying of a gunshot wound outside their house. She called for help, but the officials took too long and the man didn't make it. Meanwhile, Bautista, his sister, and several other children were playing outside nearby. They were so accustomed to violent sights that they didn't even shed a tear, and after Bautista's mother saw it, the family promptly moved to San Francisco. In his book, Bautista briefly dwells on his lack of formal education. Though he enjoyed wrestling in high school, his actual grades were far from amazing. By his senior year, which he didn't finish, they were so bad that he wasn't allowed to wrestle. Bautista says not graduating from high school is something he regrets, especially because he knows he absolutely could have done it if he had tried. Whenever he bothered to apply himself, he got good grades, and his teachers were perfectly willing to let him make up assignments. However, young Bautista just didn't care about education, and it remains a sore spot. In an interview with Sport Bible in 2018, Bautista admitted that if he could live his life again, he would focus on getting an education. Bautista might look like he was built in a shipyard, but he has a family just like everyone else, if maybe a slightly more turbulent one. Dave writes in Bautista Unleashed that his dad, a Filipino hairdresser, wasn't really prepared to be a father. Bautista also had an older brother who died in a car accident. Dave's mother, Donna Ray, managed to bring up her children while also struggling with poverty and family issues of her own. After separating from Dave's father, she started having relationships with women, which was a potential social problem for a woman coming from a conservative Greek-American family. In an interview with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, Batista says, "I never thought of her as my mom, the lesbian. She was Mom, an incredibly strong woman who always did her best to keep me out of trouble and keep me alive." To drive home his pro-LGBTQ stance, he once even threatened boxer Manny Pacquiao for making anti-gay comments. Troubled youths tend to dabble in crime, and young Dave Batista was no exception. On the podcast Anna Faris is Unqualified, Batista says his childhood gang used to specialize in petty theft. They'd go down to the houses of kids they knew and steal small stuff like clothes and knickknacks they couldn't afford.
We're always like stealing stuff and stealing this, stealing that, and the police would pick us up, and my mom would have to come get us and beat the hell out of me.
Batista has since called his youthful, thievy ways kid stuff, but puberty turned him into a completely different beast. According to the Tampa Bay Times, Batista grew large and intimidating during his later teenage years and ended up taking on a protector role in his group. He eventually ended up with an imposing body that made a career as a nightclub bouncer a pretty logical choice. Unfortunately, Batista turned out to be a bouncer of the splatter variety. He roughed up unwanted clientele so much he was once even charged with assault. If you've ever wondered what it takes to get a body like Dave Batista's, you might not like the answer. In a 2019 interview with the Tampa Bay Times, Batista says he spent his 20s in a state he calls reverse anorexia. Despite being a fresh father of 2 daughters, he had no real plans or ambitions, so he got stuck in a loop. He worked all night as a bouncer, then spent hours at the gym, and by the time he got home, he'd sleep all day and start the cycle anew. Despite weighing over 300 pounds and doing virtually nothing but working and lifting, he felt he was never big enough. Batista spent 10 years on this schedule, which didn't do any favors for his family's financial stability. As he was pushing 30, he realized he had wasted a decade of his life and was in a situation where he had to borrow money just so he could buy Christmas presents for his children.
And I realized that I had accomplished nothing, and I had no future, and I had nothing to fall back on.
This bleak situation ultimately came with a silver lining as the impoverished Batista decided to try his hand at wrestling. Dave Batista entered the physically grueling world of wrestling at a relatively late age. This may be why his first star-making tenure with the company was marred by injuries that sidelined him for months at a time. According to Batista Unleashed, his first serious injury was a triceps tear that sidelined him for 7 months in 2003. Bleacher Report listed other notorious mishaps. In 2006, he was forced to vacate his WWE World Championship because of yet another torn triceps. In 2008, a similar tear occurred in his hamstring, sidelining him. He had angered many of his colleagues. In 2007, the aftermath of the Chris Benoit case led the WWE to take a long, hard look at the company's wellness policy, and an ESPN report eventually linked Batista and a number of other wrestlers to a large doping ring. Batista strongly denied the allegations and insisted in 2010 and 2014. His first departure was reportedly because of a lack of movie opportunities, as Batista discovered WWE studios wouldn't offer him roles. He asked if he could go outside the WWE and audition for other films, but was allegedly told to get dressed for a match. Batista handed in his notice and left the company a year later, and on his last night, few people bothered to thank him or say goodbye. He made a comeback in 2013, but creative differences soon drove him out again. He reportedly wanted a slow build-up as a bad guy, but the WWE decided to strongly push him as a hero, and the fans didn't love it. According to Batista, it didn't help that when he pitched a cross-promotion with Guardians of the Galaxy, WWE big shots Triple H and Stephanie McMahon basically laughed in his face. Batista returned to the WWE one last time in 2019 when he wrapped up his wrestling career in a WrestleMania match against Triple H. Batista lost. The life of a top WWE superstar isn't an easy one to mesh with private life, and Dave Batista has been less than successful at it. In an interview with Sport Bible, Batista admitted that the year-round grind of being on the road with the WWE didn't do any favors for his marriage. According to Australian Broadcasting Corporation, he ruined 2 of his marriages while he was on the road, and it wasn't just his constant absence that was the problem. The superstar admits he was a prolific cheater, and that obviously also hurt the people who It's me again, Demetrius and
I work out to get victory over this because I'm very motivated. I saw right now last Friday I saw fight against between Peter Beef and Gwozik, and this is very big motivation for me to face with Peter Beef. I never fought him in professional boxing, but I really want. And right now, this is motivation to get victory over Canelo November 2nd.
How are you feeling after coming off short?
Real quick, last thing, Canelo versus Kovalev is next Saturday. What are your thoughts on Canelo jumping up to weight division to face her? What does it say about Canelo for his legacy? If he gets that win, what does that do for him for his career?
He's going to stay in that weight class and never back down, never again. When guys go into upper weight classes and then they come back down to their own weight classes, it always fails. It's that way. Once you move up weight, stay there, I think it'll be good.
That's a good shot. Can we open with that one? See,
of Latin America. Here we use cumbia to teach. Cumbia is like what here people, young people listen to.
what are the old people listening to? So it's like the classic cumbia and work together, and seems to be pretty popular because they've got like 300 people that come here every week. Can you show me some moves? Yeah, I'm gonna take something when I go back home. So impress my wife in the bedroom, maybe with some sweet moves. No, that element they feel. So they instrument de todo lo clásico. I'm gonna go home to my wife and kid.
The survivalist tough guy, don't we, how much do you defer to the place you're at in lieu of your survival? The survivalist hard drive operates in the moment. I don't want to die now. It doesn't operate for 100 years from now, or 200 years from now. If I tell you I found an asteroid that's going to take us out in 500 years, then let somebody else worry about it. So you're not thinking about the species, you're only thinking about your own acts. And I don't know that feels selfish, it feels human. I don't know, it seems woven into my DNA. Yeah, is it bad, or is it just the reality of it? Yes. And I can tell you, my access to people's sentiments like that came through the fact that I received letters from people. Mm-hmm. It's angst. Someone said, I heard the world's going to end in 2012, and as a kid, the adults are saying, remember the whole 2012 scare, or even the 2000 scare, the Y2K. There are people who are afraid, they don't want to die. And so who do they turn to? And I'm an astrophysicist, I have some sense of the universe. And so I get these letters from them asking about how the universe matters in their lives, particularly people who are in search of meaning. Maybe they didn't get it from whatever else they did in their walks of art and life. And so this is an intensely interpersonal collection, just for that reason. And the reason that you started saying here, how's this going to end? What does it all mean? What are we doing? So that's why I'm not traveling the planet now. I've seen that come up because people say we should cut down on our travel to preserve the planet. And I don't want to be a corollary that a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it because it exists. But if the planet is there and I can't ever go see it, is it really a planet? Well, I'm just saying, what is the definition of a planet? Yes, so I think the issue is not that we shouldn't travel, it's that we should find another way to travel that doesn't destroy. planet. Why be defeatist about what it is you should or shouldn't do? Why not be inventive and innovative? And in so doing, you come up with solutions undreamt of by the previous generation. Thomas Malthus, who said population will outstrip food supply. The population is growing exponentially, and food is only growing arithmetically, so we'll all starve to death one day. And he had no idea that science would be brought to bear on animal and nobody I've ever seen. I've been boxing for 32,000 years. I never seen it. I never seen it.
Ay, mabagal!
Masyado yung leverage, kung ano ba yung leverage, ano ba yung tamang leverage na gagamitin natin,
Leverage.
ano ba ito nagana. Meron akong video sa YouTube, andito yung link sa video description, panoorin nyo rin. So, ang una mong gagawin na mag-login ka lang sa SM account mo. So, tulad nito, nakalagin ako dito. Tapos, dito sa homepage ng XM, scroll mo lang hanggang sa baba. Tapos, makikita mo dyan yung accounts mo. For example, itong account na to, itong pangalawang account ko, mapaguhin ko ng leverage. Click lang dito sa select option. Tapos makita mo dyan yung change leverage. Tapos mamimili ka na kung anong gusto mong gamitin leverage. Halimbawa, pwede mong gamitin itong 1:800 PTA. So, meron tayong video kung ano yung tamang paggamit ng leverage, panoorin nyo, para alam nyo kung anong leverage yung pwede nyo gamitin. Okay, request. Tapos, okay na, ayan, leverage account. Kaya, subscribe kayo sa YouTube channel ko para updated kayo kung
Alright, ladies and gents, what's up and welcome back. Anything like that, and you want to help the movement grow, go ahead and check them out. Right? Crypto surpassed gold and any other store of value because this store.
Calling all social media marketers.
Nang gayahin ang outfit ng singer na si Unique Salonga. Sa kanyang post
Sinabi ni Maris na gusto lang naman niyang maging unique ang kanyang costume. Natuwa ang mga followers sa kanyang unique transformation at nung linggo, ginaya rin ni Maris ang suot ni Princess Sarah nang dumalo siya sa Black Magic Halloween. At sa atin namang showbiz news na sa mga pagsubok na pinagdaanan ng programang iba talaga si Chang at naging kapula sa pagkabigo ang
Ay, may titawin ni Gaya.
Talaga.
Forever young, I wanna be forever young.
Isa pa lamang ito na ang kanyang tangkad. Isa ito sa mga naging advantage niya sa pakikipag-away. Noong mga panahon na ito, wala pang alam na gawin sa Sakuragi kung hindi ang mambuli at pakipag-away. Ni minsan, hindi pumasok sa isip niya na maglaro ng basketball o sumali sa isang team para irepresenta ang kanilang paaralan. Pero ito ay nag-iba noong siya ay minsang nakipag-away sa isang lalaki sa kanilang eskwelahan na sakto mang isa ring miyembro ng isang basketball team. Dahil nga, di kasing lalaki talaga si Sakuragi, sinadya niya mismo sa gym kung saan nagpa-practice ng basketball ang kanyang kaaway. Sa away na ito, nabugbog ng sobra si Hanamichi dahil sino nga ba ang nasa tamang pag-iisip na puntahan na ang kaaway ng mag-isa, kasama pa ang buong team at hamunin ng suntukan. Sa labas ng gym ay iniwan ng team si Sakuragi na nakahandusay at puno ng pasa sa iba't ibang bahagi ng katawan. Dito ngayon papasok ang kanilang coach na siyang hindi nagkaroon ng pagkakataong pumagit na sa away dahil wala siya noong nangyari ang bugbugan. Tinulungan niya si Hanamichi at doon nagsimula ang magandang pagkakaibigan ng dalawa. Fast forward, dahil naging maganda ang pagsasama ng dalawa, nakumbinse na mag-try out si Hanamichi para sumali sa kanilang team. Imbes na gamitin ang tangkad sa pagkikipag-away na alam naman natin masama, ay bakit hindi na lang gamitin sa mabuting paraan kung saan maaari ka rin namang manalo ng walang sakitan. Naging maayos naman ang training ni Hanamichi at malaki ang nakikitang potensyal ng kanyang coach. Base sa mga kwento, 17 anyos siya nang unang makasali sa isang totoong basketball match. Bagamat baguhan pa lang, hindi siya nagpatinag sa mga kalaban. Ang kalaban nila noon ay masasabi kong profesional na pagdating sa pagbobola. Pero nilampasan niya ang mga kalaban at doon sa sinasabing match ay nakakuha siya ng sumatotal na 33 na puntos. Nabanggit ko na nilampasan niya ang mga kalaban pero hindi kaya ng isa ang 5. Hindi kinaya ng kanyang kakayahan na buhatin ang buong team at sa uli nakakuha sila ng 59 points at ang sa kalaban naman ay 150 points. Tandaan na sa 59 points ay 33 ang kay Sakuragi at ang 26 naman ay sa buong team. Bumalik si Sakuragi sa Tokyo kung saan siya naninirahan. Pero ang pagbalik nila ito ay ang magiging sanhi ng hindi inaasahang insidente. Pagbaba niya sa sinasakyang bus, tumuwid siya sa kanto. Sa kanyang pagtawid ay sakto naman may humaharurot na sasakyan at doon nabunggo si Hanamichi Sakuragi. Alam natin na may malaasero siyang katawan dahil nga marami na ang kanyang karanasan sa pagkikipagpugbugan. Pero sa pagkakataong ito, ang itinuturing natin ng man of steel na si Sakuragi ay hindi kinaya ang pinsalang natamo sa aksidente. Pagkabunggo ng sasakyan ay sa totoo lang, nakatayo pa siya pero hindi na niya nakaya pang umalis sa gitna ng kalsada at sa gitna ng kalsada siya nawalan ng malay. Agaran naman siyang dinala sa pagamutan Pero pagdating ay nalaman nila na wala na pala siyang buhay at ang kanyang ikinamatay ay internal hemorrhage o internal bleeding. Isang napakagandang kwento at nakaka-inspire kung tutusin. Isang simpleng tao na naging bad boy dahil sa pagkawala ng kanyang magulang at kayong kaalaman sa istoryang ito para makatulong sa pagpapatigil. Sana mapansin mo next week. Hi, Ma'am Melanie, kung...
A VPN for Firefox users, SIM jacking threat wire for September 17th, 2019, your summary of the threats to our security, privacy, and internet freedom. If you are interested in give users the chance to videos continue to go out this
This is one time had been used by Spellovero.
Charlotte, can you tell me about this factory that we're at here?
Maybe 2 minutes out of the zone because they just wanted to show me the place, but I believe that was after he was doing the drugs and they were cleaning out. But it was to this lab I was cooking all the food for.
Oh, you recognise this address? Have you been here before?
Yes, I recognise the name.
So you would have walked through this way, is that true?
And yet another clandestine drug lab location.
There was some things going on there wrong, but and then I think the machinery was kind of
What can you tell me about where Steve was going since what he explained to you when he was here?
he was talking about that he was going to do a phase, a fan to be like he was going.
The drug lab. They have the shoes, the mask. They have the testimony of 2 witnesses from a company that sells the equipment found in the lab. And they have the evidence from Charlotte Lindstrom. With such damning evidence, Stephen Spellovero pleads guilty to manufacturing a large commercial quantity of a prohibited drug. He was sentenced to more than 16 years jail. Charlotte called off her engagement, pleaded guilty to organising the contract kill of 2 witnesses, but in a bid for less time in prison, she testified against Stephen Spellovero.
In court, when she's had to face Stephen, she's gotten quite emotional when talking about their relationship. It's obviously something that's still quite raw for both of them. Her giving evidence against him is the only time that she's had a chance to see him since she was arrested back in 2007.
Charlotte also goes to court for her own sentencing for conspiring to kill 2 men. Today, a Supreme Court judge said there was no doubt she was acting under a form of duress and was being completely manipulated by her boyfriend. Justice Rothman said Lindstrom's state of mind at the time caused her to romanticize the relationship with her boyfriend And because of that, she wasn't fully aware of the consequences of her actions.
I don't think she could believe that she was in jail. She quite often complained about the conditions in jail, and on numerous occasions I had to explain to her that she actually was in prison and that she had tried to kill 2 people just to bring her feet back down.
She's just naive, young.
Yeah, Charlotte's 25 now. She went into jail at 22. She's done 3 years. The family can't wait to have her back. Impressively, these are a very normal middle-class Swedish family, absolutely rocked by this. But they said it either destroys you or it makes you stronger. And her mother has run Charlotte every day for the past 2 years in prison, and they got her through this.
With her parents by her side, Charlotte went straight from prison to Sydney Airport and flew home to Sweden. Still looking every bit the captivating socialite.
They definitely, he definitely still...
And these were men that had their hands tied behind their back, had been shot between the eyes and had their ears cut.
In 2003, 1,000 Italian police raided Plati and arrested 220 alleged mafiosi, including the mayor, current and former town councillors, and the chief of police. From the time of Don's murder, Barbara McKay fought to draw attention to the case.
There are unanswered questions, and I don't know whether all of those will be answered ever. Some of them we may just never have answers to.
It's been an extraordinary case. I mean, the headlines that came out of Griffith to speak for themselves, and they were...
Out na mga boys.